Belarus is at a pivotal moment in its history, as resistance to Russian domination reaches an intensity unseen since the Soviet Union's collapse. Across the nation, citizens, military leaders, and even members of the government are uniting in defiance of Moscow's influence, signaling a dramatic shift in Belarus's political and social landscape. The ongoing Russia-Ukraine war has only amplified this momentum, with Belarusians increasingly questioning the price of their country's allegiance to Russia. But can Belarus truly break free from Moscow's grip, or is it too deeply entrenched in the Kremlin's orbit? Is this wave of defiance a genuine call for independence, or merely a fleeting response to the pressures of sanctions and war? These questions lie at the heart of Eastern Europe's shifting geopolitics, as Belarus stands on the brink of a transformation that could redefine its role in the region and its relationship with Russia forever. Let's find the answer in this video. Public resistance against Russian influence in Belarus has reached unprecedented levels, with recent polls showing that 43% of Belarusians now consider Russia the greatest threat to their territorial integrity. This growing opposition marks a significant shift in the traditionally close relationship between the two nations. The surge in anti-Russian sentiment is evident in recent polling data, which reveals that 51% of Belarusians do not approve of Russia's actions in Ukraine, while 47% oppose deployment of Russian troops in Belarus. This resistance has manifested despite state-controlled media's pro-Russian narrative, indicating a deepening divide between official policy and public opinion. A closer look at key indicators reveals just how strong this resistance is. A staggering 85% of Belarusians are opposed to their own military's involvement in any operations related to the war in Ukraine. Furthermore, only a tiny 3% of the population supports the idea of Belarusian troops being deployed to fight in the conflict. Even more telling is that 62% of the population rejects the use of Belarusian territory as a base for military operations, demonstrating widespread concerns over the direct impact of the war on their own country. This data underscores a significant divergence between the government's pro-Russian position and the growing wariness of the Belarusian public regarding their involvement in the ongoing crisis. Grassroots resistance has evolved into organized networks, with the emergence of underground activist groups like Paramoa. This movement has grown to include approximately 200,000 participants, with two-thirds operating within Belarus. These groups have demonstrated their effectiveness through coordinated actions, including railway disruptions, that have significantly impacted Russian military movements. Digital platforms have become crucial battlegrounds for resistance, with Telegram emerging as the primary channel for organizing opposition. The Next Alive Telegram channel has experienced explosive growth, becoming the largest Belarus-based channel. 9 out of the top 10 Belarus-based Telegram channels now actively support the opposition movement. The digital resistance extends beyond social media, with 70 Belarusian IT specialists actively engaged in cyber operations against state institutions. These cyber activists have successfully penetrated government databases and exposed sensitive information about security services, demonstrating the sophisticated nature of the resistance movement. The authorities have responded to this surge in activism with increased repression, introducing the death penalty for attempted terrorist acts. Despite these measures, the resistance continues to grow, with at least 1,575 Belarusians detained for their anti-war stance in recent months. This crackdown has paradoxically strengthened the resolve of opposition forces, leading to more innovative forms of resistance and broader international support. The movement has maintained its momentum despite significant challenges, with protesters adopting increasingly sophisticated strategies to circumvent state surveillance and repression. When the government attempted to restrict internet access, nearly half the population installed VPN services within 48 hours, demonstrating the population's determination to maintain information flow and coordination capabilities. The Belarusian military establishment has shown unprecedented signs of fracture in its relationship with Russia, marking a significant shift in the traditional military alliance. Senior military officials have taken bold stands against involvement in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, demonstrating a growing independence from Moscow's influence. Military units across Belarus have demonstrated strong opposition to participation in combat operations. Reports indicate that most low-ranked Belarusian soldiers have explicitly opposed participating in the invasion of Ukraine. The resistance has been so significant that military commanders have reported to their superiors about the risk of mass mutiny or surrender if units were deployed to Ukraine. A significant wave of high-level defections has recently swept through the Belarusian military, signaling a growing rift within the armed forces. Among the most notable departures is Major General Viktor Gulevich, who served as the Deputy Defense Minister. Gulevich resigned, citing his inability to effectively mobilize troops as the primary reason for his departure. His resignation marks a striking blow to the leadership of the Belarusian military and highlights the deepening discontent within its ranks. Alongside Gulevich, dozens of other military officials have stepped down in protest against the possibility of Belarus becoming further entangled in the ongoing conflict, expressing their refusal to support any potential involvement in the war. Adding to the turmoil, several senior officers have not only resigned but have also fled the country, seeking refuge abroad. These officers have established contact with opposition figures and groups, signaling their alignment with those opposing the current government's stance on the war. This mass exodus of military personnel has sent shockwaves through the ranks, leading to an atmosphere of growing demoralization among both senior officers and conscripts. Military leadership has been unable to reverse this decline in morale, with reports emerging that efforts to convince unit commanders to form combat groups have been unsuccessful. The failure to mobilize and inspire the troops has left the Belarusian armed forces in a state of disarray, further complicating the government's position and raising questions about the future stability of its military structure. Border forces have shown particular resistance to aggressive positioning against Ukraine. When ordered to deploy along the Ukrainian border, many units demonstrated reluctance to comply. The situation has led to significant tensions, with Ukrainian officials urging Belarus to withdraw forces from the border region. The border force stance has created a complex diplomatic situation, with Belarus maintaining that its troop movements are purely defensive. However, Ukrainian intelligence has reported the concentration of significant military personnel, including special operations forces, in the Gomel region. This has prompted Ukraine to warn that any violation of its border would make all Belarusian military facilities legitimate targets. The military's resistance has effectively prevented Belarus from becoming directly involved in the conflict, despite pressure from Moscow. This stance is supported by military analysts who suggest that if ordered to enter Ukraine, there might be mass refusals to follow orders. The situation has forced Belarusian leadership to maintain a delicate balance between appeasing Russian interests and preventing internal military destabilization. Western sanctions have pushed Belarus's economy to a breaking point, forcing unprecedented levels of dependence on Russia. The country's economic sovereignty faces its greatest challenge as international restrictions reshape its trade patterns and financial relationships. The repercussions of Western sanctions on Belarus have been profoundly damaging, with the country losing access to exports worth an estimated $16 to $18 billion to the European Union and North America. These sanctions have had a broad and severe impact, particularly in areas that are vital to Belarus's economy. Notably, the export of petroleum products and potash, two of the country's key exports, has been significantly restricted, leaving a considerable gap in national revenues. In addition to these export limitations, Belarus has also faced severe obstacles in accessing international capital markets, which has severely curtailed its ability to secure financing for government spending and investment. The country's banking sector has not been spared either, with operations being significantly impaired as financial transactions have become increasingly difficult. The restrictions on transportation and logistics channels have further exacerbated the problem, disrupting the movement of goods and services both within Belarus and with its trade partners. These challenges have compounded the financial strain on the nation, particularly in light of the technical default on external debts that Belarus experienced in 2022. As a result of this default, Belarus now finds itself in debt to Russian government entities to the tune of $10.2 billion. This growing financial burden, coupled with the effects of the sanctions, has put Belarus in a precarious economic position, further isolating it from the international community and limiting its ability to recover soon. Belarus's economic relationship with Russia has reached unprecedented levels of dependency. Trade with Russia now accounts for 70% of Belarus's total trade volume, while considering logistics and transportation control. Russia effectively oversees up to 90% of Belarusian exports and about 80% of imports. The loss of traditional export routes has forced Belarus to redirect its trade through Russian infrastructure. In 2023, Belarus secured 14 million tons of port capacity in Russia, primarily for potash fertilizers and oil products, though this remains below the required volumes. This logistical dependency has resulted in a 48% decline in freight turnover since 2018. Belarus has attempted to diversify its trade relationships, particularly with China and other Asian markets. Chinese trade has shown promise, with exports to China growing by 80% to $1.6 billion in 2022. However, this figure remains modest compared to Russian trade volumes. The country has explored alternative energy suppliers, including potential deals with Saudi Arabia and the UAE. However, these efforts have been complicated by Western sanctions and logistical challenges. Belarus continues to rely on Russia for over 80% of its energy resources, making any meaningful diversification difficult in the short term. The economic pressure has led to a significant brain drain, with more than 100,000 citizens leaving Belarus since 2020, including numerous high-level specialists. This exodus has particularly impacted the IT sector, whose contribution to GDP decreased from 7.5% in 2021 to 5% in 2022, further limiting economic diversification opportunities. Significant cracks have emerged in Belarus's political power structure as the traditional alliance between President Lukashenko and the country's elite faces unprecedented strain. The political landscape has shifted dramatically since the 2020 protests, with over 1,000 political prisoners receiving decade-plus prison sentences. The loyalty of Belarus's nomenklatura, once a cornerstone of Lukashenko's regime, has eroded significantly. Russian intervention during the 2020 protests has weakened Lukashenko's monopoly on decision-making, with direct working contacts between Belarusian and Russian authorities increasing substantially. The economic impact of Western sanctions has particularly affected the elite, with state enterprises losing approximately $14 billion in export revenues. Within the structure of government itself, fissures have begun to emerge, pointing to growing instability at the core of Lukashenko's administration. The security services, which have traditionally been staunch enforcers of regime loyalty, are now grappling with internal conflicts, undermining their effectiveness and unity. Similarly, the state banking sector has been thrown into disarray, with a wave of mass arrests targeting senior management, further destabilizing key financial institutions. Regional authorities have also started showing signs of resistance, a rare and troubling development for a regime that has long relied on centralized control. Even among ministers, dissent has become more visible, with some openly opposing presidential directives, an unprecedented challenge to Lukashenko's authority. These fractures within the political and institutional framework of Belarus not only reflect the growing dissatisfaction among the ruling elite, but also signify a broader unraveling of the mechanisms that have long kept the regime intact. The convergence of economic pressure, external interference, and internal dissent has placed Lukashenko's administration in a precarious position, raising questions about its ability to maintain stability and control in the face of mounting challenges. The opposition has achieved unprecedented unity under Svyatlana Tsikhanouskaya's leadership. In August 2022, the United Transitional Cabinet was established, incorporating Tikhanovskaya's office operations in Vilnius, the National Anti-Crisis Management, the Warsaw-based BIPOL Initiative, and the Opposition Initiative, including cyber partisans. The opposition has gained significant international recognition, with the EU maintaining support throughout 4 years of crisis. Their demands include the complete withdrawal of Russian troops and nuclear weapons from Belarus, reflecting growing public sentiment against foreign military presence. Local governance structures have shown increasing independence from central control. The regime's grip on regional authorities has weakened, with mass arrests affecting senior managers at major state enterprises and banks. At Gazprom Transgaz Belarus alone, approximately 100 former and current employees were arrested, indicating deep institutional instability. The political transformation has extended to party structures, with authorities announcing mandatory re-registration of political parties, aiming to reduce the number from 15 to 3 to 4 regime-friendly parties. This move, however, has faced resistance from regional power centers and opposition groups operating from exile. The security apparatus, traditionally Lukashenko's strongest support base, has shown signs of divided loyalty. The National Security Committee and Ministry of Interior have emerged as central regime pillars, yet their influence has become increasingly contested as opposition forces develop parallel security structures abroad. Civilian resistance in Belarus has evolved into a sophisticated network of coordinated actions, marking a decisive shift in the struggle against Russian military presence. The resistance manifests through 3 distinct channels: physical sabotage, street protests, and digital warfare. A clandestine network of railway workers and activists has successfully disrupted Russian military logistics through Belarus. The campaign has resulted in at least 17 major acts of sabotage on railways, effectively paralyzing the movement of Russian troops and equipment into Ukraine. The railway resistance began just 2 days after the invasion started, with activists targeting signal control cabinets and critical infrastructure. Key impacts of the railway campaign include a complete halt of railway traffic between Ukraine and Belarus, forcing the Russian military to attempt resupply by road, and contributing to the infamous 40-mile military convoy delay north of Kyiv. Mass protests erupted across Belarus following Russia's invasion of Ukraine, despite severe government crackdowns. Authorities have detained at least 1,575 people for anti-war activities, with protesters facing charges ranging from participating in unauthorized gatherings to alleged acts of terrorism. During the February 27th to 28th demonstrations alone, security forces arrested more than 1,100 protesters. The government's response has intensified, with authorities now treating anti-war activism as a serious crime. Protesters face persecution for actions as simple as displaying blue and yellow ribbons, creating no-to-war graffiti, and laying flowers at the Ukrainian embassy. The cyber partisans have emerged as a formidable force in Belarus's digital resistance landscape. The group has expanded from 15 members in late 2021 to 30 members in early 2022, coordinating sophisticated cyber operations against state infrastructure. Their activities have grown to include approximately 70 IT specialists actively engaged in hacking Russian government databases. The impact of the cyber partisans' activities has been profound, shaking the foundations of state control and exposing vulnerabilities in Belarus's authoritarian infrastructure. Among their most notable achievements is the successful disruption of government surveillance systems, a critical tool for suppressing dissent and monitoring citizens. By targeting these systems, the cyber partisans have significantly weakened the state's ability to control and intimidate its population. In another striking victory, the group managed to obtain and release sensitive data from Belarus's security services, exposing the inner workings of the regime and undermining its credibility. Additionally, the cyber partisans have played a pivotal role in empowering opposition movements by developing secure communication tools specifically designed for protesters. These tools have provided activists with a means to organize and communicate without fear of government interception, fostering a more coordinated and resilient resistance movement. The group's most notable achievement was the successful hack of Belarus's railway computer systems, which forced Russian military logistics to shift away from rail transport. To support protesters, the cyber partisans developed specialized tools including an encrypted SEMS application and a secure version of Telegram called Partisan Telegram. Despite facing severe repression, with authorities introducing 20-year prison terms for railway sabotage activities, the civilian resistance movement continues to adapt and evolve. The widespread installation of VPN services by nearly half the population within 48 hours of government internet restrictions demonstrates the population's determination to maintain their resistance. The international community has mobilized unprecedented support for Belarus's democratic aspirations, with major Western powers pledging substantial assistance packages. The European Union has emerged as a leading supporter, preparing a comprehensive €3 billion economic support package for a future democratic Belarus. The European Union has taken a firm stance supporting Belarus's democratic transition, with European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen declaring unequivocal support for the Belarusian people's desire for change. The United States has demonstrated its commitment by providing over $1 billion in foreign assistance to civil society organizations since 1992. Western nations have bolstered their support through targeted diplomatic initiatives. Western nations have recently opened a U.S. Agency for International Development office in Vilnius to oversee aid distribution, while the EU has established a consultative group to collaborate directly with Belarusian democratic forces. Alongside these diplomatic measures, Western powers have implemented targeted sanctions against the current regime, aimed at weakening its ability to suppress dissent. In parallel, significant support has been directed to independent media and civil society organizations to strengthen the foundations of democratic governance. The EU's comprehensive support package includes €1.5 billion in EU loans and €400 million in grant assistance for democratic transition. These funds are dedicated to enhancing critical sectors, including the justice system, business environment, and small to medium enterprise development. Additionally, they focus on reforming essential public services such as education and healthcare, and bolstering social safety nets to protect vulnerable populations during the transition. The United States has complemented these efforts through various programs, including the Westernist Enterprise Fund and the SABIT program. These initiatives aim to promote private sector development and provide practical market economy experience to Belarusian executives. The international community security support strategy emphasizes Belarus's sovereignty and independence. The EU has expressed deep concern about actions affecting Belarus's national identity and has condemned the regime's support for Russia's military actions. Western powers have outlined specific security measures, including support for constitutional reforms, military restructuring assistance, border security enhancement, and cyber defense capabilities development. The EU has pledged to mobilize €100 million in grant funding to leverage €1 billion in key public and private investments, supporting Belarus's green and digital transformation. This includes developing critical infrastructure and enhancing border security systems. The United States maintains its commitment to a sovereign, independent Belarus, while the EU has prepared specific flagship investments targeting, such as support for 20,000 SMEs, improved transport connectivity, digital transformation initiatives, energy efficiency programs, and democratic institution building. These international support measures are contingent upon Belarus embarking on a genuine democratic transition path. The EU has emphasized that this assistance package represents a genuine incentive for the current authorities to change their course while maintaining sanctions against the current regime until democratic reforms are implemented. The path to Belarus's independence faces significant hurdles as recent constitutional changes and integration programs with Russia threaten to erode national sovereignty. A comprehensive analysis reveals the systematic dismantling of independent governance structures across multiple sectors. The constitutional referendum, held in February 2022, signaled a transformative and controversial turning point in Belarus's political landscape, fundamentally altering the country's governance structure. Among the most significant changes was the removal of Belarus's nuclear-free status, a decision that has raised concerns about the country's potential future role in regional security dynamics. Another critical amendment extended the potential for Alexander Lukashenko to remain in power until 2035, solidifying his grip on the presidency through modifications that reset his term limits. Additionally, the referendum established the All-Belarusian People's Assembly as the nation's highest representative body, granting it authority that supersedes other branches of government. This new entity effectively entrenches centralized power while diminishing the checks and balances that are hallmarks of democratic governance. Further provisions introduced immunity from prosecution for former presidents, a measure widely perceived as a safeguard for Lukashenko against future legal challenges. The amendments also imposed restrictions on presidential candidates, barring individuals with foreign residency from running, a move seen as an effort to curb opposition figures who have been forced into exile. The official results claimed that 65.2% of voters supported the amendments, but these figures have been widely contested. The referendum was conducted in an atmosphere of severe repression, with authorities cracking down on dissent and stifling any form of opposition campaigning. Independent observers and international watchdogs reported serious irregularities, noting that the process failed to meet the basic standards of free and fair elections. The lack of transparency and the absence of genuine political competition have cast a long shadow over the legitimacy of the referendum, reinforcing concerns about the consolidation of authoritarian rule in Belarus. This contentious process not only cemented Lukashenko's authority but also underscored the widening gulf between the regime and the Belarusian populace, many of whom continue to resist the erosion of democratic principles and the nation's increasing alignment with Russia's geopolitical agenda. The aftermath of the referendum has deepened divisions within Belarusian society, raising questions about the country's future trajectory and the possibility of meaningful reform. The military reorganization has accelerated integration with Russian forces. The establishment of a new Southern Operational Command has expanded Belarus's military infrastructure, requiring an increase of 15,000 troops. This restructuring includes the creation of new tactical units and support infrastructure, enhancement of special operations forces, development of logistics and engineering capabilities, and integration of command systems with Russian forces. The military doctrine of the Union States, adopted in November 2021, has led to deeper military integration, including unified command systems and joint training centers. This integration enables Russia to deploy advanced weapons systems, such as S-400 missile systems and Iskander ballistic missiles, on Belarusian territory. The economic transition between Belarus and Russia is guided by the framework of 28 Union State roadmaps, which aim to deepen integration across various sectors. However, progress on these roadmaps has been uneven, with only 7 fully implemented by early 2023. This uneven advancement highlights the challenges and complexities inherent in merging the two nations' economic and regulatory systems. One of the most significant areas of progress has been in customs control, where full implementation has granted Russian authorities access to Belarusian tax data. This change has facilitated a more seamless exchange of economic information between the two countries, but has also raised concerns about Belarus's diminishing control over its fiscal policies. In the banking sector, efforts to integrate remain ongoing, with significant implications for Belarus's financial sovereignty. Critics have warned that deeper alignment in this area could result in Belarus becoming increasingly dependent on Russian financial institutions, potentially undermining its ability to maintain independent monetary policy. Taxation has seen partial implementation, with Belarus synchronizing some of its tax rates with those of Russia. While this alignment may simplify bilateral trade and investment, it also reflects a broader trend of Belarus ceding economic autonomy to Moscow. Similarly, macroeconomic policy integration has been fully implemented, aligning Belarusian fiscal and economic strategies with those of Russia. This alignment further underscores the growing influence of Moscow in shaping Belarus's economic direction. Transport control remains under development, with ongoing efforts to integrate infrastructure and logistics systems. While this integration may improve connectivity and economic efficiency between the two countries, it also highlights the extent to which Belarus's domestic infrastructure is being shaped to align with Russian priorities. The implementation process requires changes primarily to Belarusian legislation, with Russian authorities gaining access to indirect tax information. This economic integration represents what analysts describe as a de facto attack on Belarusian economic sovereignty. The roadmap implementation has faced resistance, with significant hindrances observed in payment systems integration and the creation of a single gas market. However, the process continues to advance, with plans to sign additional agreements on direct taxes in the 2024 to 2026 period. The integration extends beyond economic spheres into social and cultural domains, with 11 main directions for integration outlined in the plan. New areas include education, healthcare, and information policy coordination, raising concerns about the preservation of Belarus's cultural independence. Belarus's strategic realignment takes shape as the country becomes the first European member of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, marking a significant shift in its international relations framework. This development signals a fundamental restructuring of Belarus's foreign policy architecture amid ongoing regional tensions. Belarus's pursuit of balanced foreign relations reflects a strategic pivot from total dependence on Russia. The country's Shanghai Cooperation Organization membership provides opportunities to synchronize north-south and east-west transit corridors, amplify anti-sanction agenda through multilateral platforms, improve geoeconomic security through diversified partnerships, and strengthen institutional ties with China. President Lukashenko has emphasized that the Shanghai Cooperation Organization offers a strategic perspective in key areas including trade, investment, innovation, and transport infrastructure development. This reorientation comes as 90% of the 28 union programs with Russia have been completed, necessitating new partnerships to maintain sovereignty. Belarus has accelerated the transformation of its regional partnerships, forging new frameworks for economic and security cooperation as it seeks to adapt to shifting geopolitical realities. The country is actively diversifying its trade and diplomatic engagements, reaching beyond its traditional allies to build relationships with non-Western regions and organizations. Economic collaboration has emerged as a focal point of this transition. Belarus is actively implementing initiatives with member states of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, particularly in the areas of trade and logistics, signaling a strong push for integration into Asian markets. In Africa, Belarus is laying the groundwork for economic partnerships that aim to tap into the continent's growing demand for industrial goods and agricultural expertise. The Middle East has also become a key area of focus, with exploratory talks underway to foster energy cooperation. Meanwhile, Belarus has sought to deepen ties with BRICS, applying to enhance market access and secure a foothold in this influential bloc. These efforts reflect a broader strategy to diversify Belarus's economic portfolio and reduce reliance on traditional partners. A concrete example of these diversification efforts is Belarus's acquisition of 14 million tons of port capacity in Russia. This move secures a reliable trade route amid Western sanctions, but also underscores the country's simultaneous push to develop alternative trade channels with nations not participating in the sanctions regime. These actions highlight a pragmatic approach to navigating economic challenges while strategically broadening international cooperation. In the realm of security, Belarus has undertaken significant adjustments to its framework, with constitutional changes marking a pivotal shift in its defense posture. Notably, the country has relinquished its neutrality principle and removed its nuclear weapon-free status, opening the door for expanded military cooperation with Russia. This has been exemplified by the deployment of tactical nuclear weapons on Belarusian soil and the formation of a joint regional military unit, underscoring the deepening military integration between the two nations. Enhanced border security measures have also been introduced, reflecting heightened concerns about regional stability. Strategic partnerships have further evolved, with Belarus developing new security protocols to address emerging threats. The expansion of defense cooperation has been accompanied by efforts to modernize military infrastructure, ensuring that the country remains aligned with its security objectives while adapting to the shifting dynamics of Eastern Europe. The security landscape has evolved with up to 2,000 Russian soldiers and maintenance personnel currently stationed at Belarus's airports and radar facilities. However, Belarus maintains significant autonomy in its military decisions, as evidenced by its refusal to directly participate in the Russia-Ukraine conflict despite the pressure. The relationship with China has emerged as a crucial element in Belarus's future security framework. Beijing has become Minsk's preferred alternative for avoiding sole dependence on Russia for economic and military needs. This strategic partnership is reinforced through various initiatives, including joint military exercises focusing on night landing training, water obstacle crossing, and urban operations. Belarus's future relations framework emphasizes maintaining sovereignty while navigating complex regional dynamics. The country has demonstrated its ability to preserve significant degrees of autonomy in relations with various powers, even as it manages integration pressures. This approach includes coordinating monetary, credit, and macroeconomic policies while maintaining independence in key strategic decisions. The evolution of Belarus's international positioning reflects a careful balance between maintaining traditional ties and developing new partnerships. Despite being Moscow's only ally in Europe, Belarus has maintained space for independent decision-making, particularly evident in its stance on the Russia-Ukraine conflict. This strategic positioning allows Belarus to leverage its geographical location while pursuing a more autonomous foreign policy trajectory. Belarus is at a turning point, with resistance to Russian influence growing across military, economic, and political fronts. Public dissent, military refusals, and economic pressures highlight a nation grappling with sovereignty and independence. While Western sanctions deepen Belarus's reliance on Russia, new partnerships with China and other nations signal efforts to diversify. Political fractures and international support hint at the possibility of significant change ahead. Do you think Belarus can achieve true independence and democracy? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We are very happy if this video brings useful information to you. Please like and subscribe to the channel so that we can discuss more about military topics in the future. Thank you very much for watching the video.